Hello there, Loganistas, and welcome to a new slice of Prager U, the series where I dissect and debunk the page shill bullshittery of the laughable YouTube channel which masquerades as a university, Prager U. And after I'm done with them, I say, "Hey Prager, F you! Oh my god, I'm so fucking clever!" And today, the Wilkes brothers, the fracking billionaire gobshites who fund the PragerU clown show, are getting exactly what they want. Full-force bootlickery from a fawning ultra-capitalist lackey donkey turd. As we take a look at the PragerU video, Capitalism versus Socialism. And no surprises for guessing that the host of this intellectual car crash, Andy Puzder, who is apparently a former restaurant chain CEO, well, yeah, he doesn't understand what socialism is. Or strangely enough, even what capitalism is, which is odd considering he wrote a book called Capitalist Comeback. Well, this ought to be entertaining at least.
Capitalism versus socialism. We can sum up each economic system in one line. Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right?
Well, kinda, but it's more complicated than that.
Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right? No. Wrong. So wrong. It's exactly backwards.
Well, not only is it still more complicated than that, but you're just plain fucking wrong. But anyways, please spew forth your pro-capitalist spiel about how altruistic capitalists are. I mean, we've all heard it a million fucking times already, and it's still as totally fucking wrong now as it was when the first galaxy-brained dickhead came up with it, but don't let that stop you. I mean, what would a PragerU video even be if it wasn't for all the endlessly repeated K2 Institute hack talking points anyway?
Been on Amazon lately? Each of the thousands of products Amazon offers represents the work of people who believe they have something you want or need. If they're right, they prosper. If they're wrong, they don't. That's how the free market works. It encourages people to improve their lives by satisfying the needs of others.
You see, it really is just the same old right-wing, libertarian bullshit. Right then, let's go through it, shall we? Firstly, Amazon is a fucking terrible company for you to have chosen as your example of how super awesome and altruistic capitalism is, given how horrifically they treat their employees, how hard they work to fuck over the taxpayer, how little actual tax they pay themselves, and how the CEO, Jeff Bezos, is the ultimate symbol of wealth-hoarding capitalist greed, which is killing the planet and the societies that inhabit it. Second, the items available for purchase there are not the product of the oh-so-kind capitalists, but rather results of the labour by the workers who fucking made them, including the ones working in virtual slave labour conditions. No, capitalists are merely the ones creaming off the excess value. They can and should be removed from this dynamic completely. Thirdly, the capitalist is not providing these products out of the goodness of their heart. They are doing it for the money. For the very greed that you denied was their motivating factor. If they cared so much about the consumer's needs, why do they put such massive markups on their products? It's because this is all about the money. Not the people, the money, you lying bastard. Also, the free market does not operate in reality the way you imagine it does from the pseudo-libertarian fantasy land that you seem to be inhabiting.
No one starts a business making a thing or providing a service for themselves. They start a business to make things or provide services for others.
Again, they aren't doing it to improve the lives of their customers, for fuck's sake. It's almost like the profit motive is a dirty secret you want to try to hide from your viewers, you devious cockwomble. Also, it isn't actually true that companies don't start out of a need to provide a thing for oneself. Various inventions and innovations have sprung from individuals problem-solving a personal matter. After all, the provider of a product or service is a human being as well, with the same human needs as everyone else, so sometimes they'll do stuff to satisfy a personal need and find that others have that need too, and thus a business is born. I mean, that really isn't the biggest flaw in Mr. Puzder's bullshit script, but I highlight it just to show how little he seems to understand of capitalism, the system he is supposed to be defending here.
I speak from personal experience. When I was the CEO of the company that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's restaurant chains, we spent millions of dollars every year trying to determine what customers wanted. If our customers didn't like something, we changed it, and fast. Because if we didn't, our competitors would, pun intended, eat us for lunch.
Firstly, that's a really terrible food pun. Trust me, I am a pun god. Your wordplay game is weak as a diarrhea shit. But more importantly, again here, your restaurants weren't doing this out of charity. It was because they wanted to increase profits, to stuff already rich bastards' pockets. Don't try to dress this up as altruism, because that's utter bollocks. And secondly, I know that you said you researched what your customers wanted. not what they needed. And here we run into one of the first major bumps in the PragerU shill road for this video. You see, restaurants, and I want to be clear, I'm not accusing any particular restaurants of this because I don't wish to be sued to Kingdom Come, but let's just say unnamed restaurants will pump their food full of all kinds of really unbelievably unethically unhealthy additives in order to make their food taste better and thus potentially increase their profits, or to prolong the shelf life of their produce and thus decrease their overheads. Now that practice may make people want their food more, but it sure as fuck won't help them in the long run. The obesity crisis in America is truly terrifying, as are the increases in diabetes and cancer, so the unhealthy crap put into people's foods is really not what the people need. So those companies aren't just not serving the needs of the people, in fact they are actively hurting and ultimately shortening the lives of those people. Because, say it with me now people, it's about the money, not the people. The money, you lying bastard, Puzda.
The consumer, that's you, has the ultimate power. In effect, you vote with every dollar you spend.
And here we go with the voting with your dollars canard. This ethical consumption argument, such that it is, really is one of the most irritating capitalist lies. Firstly, it's a direct attempt to equate capitalism with democracy, which is absurd, given that capitalism is a top-down rigid power structure where you follow orders or you fucking starve. Hardly democratic, wouldn't you say? Also, even under that false democratic facade, it doesn't really work either, because your option to vote with your wallet is based on whether or not you have enough wealth in order to vote at all. If you're dirt poor, there's no real choice but to go for the cheapest shit available, which is likely to be unhealthy as fuck and produced using some very, very dodgy employment practices. Also, even if you have the wealth in order to vote in this system, you still have the problem of getting access to enough information in order to make an informed decision. Because remember when I was explaining about the shitty stuff that those unnamed food companies were putting into their products? Yeah, well, they don't exactly advertise that shit. In fact, they advertise the exact opposite, regardless of how full of shit those adverts are. And they actively suppress reporting on their shady practices by colluding with media companies who themselves rely on the advertising revenue from said shady companies. And all of that goes to ensuring that the consumer, that's us remember, is blissfully unaware of the real face of the capitalist greed which is poisoning both the planet and the people of the planet. Yeah, I've said it before, but it bears repeating. Eating the rich is the only ethical consumption under capitalism.
In a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power.
Well, Andy, you seem to not know, or are deliberately lying by omission, about the fact that there are various types of socialism that don't want any government whatsoever. So your little canard about absolute totalitarian scary socialism is a straw man at best and a downright propagandist smear at worst.
Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it.
The lack of self-awareness here is fucking remarkable. The concept of a capitalist opposing the idea of a small group of elite bastards deciding what people get and how much they pay for it is too hypocritical for words alone to do justice to. I mean, Puzda, you gaping anus, the very thing you just described is capitalism. You don't even fucking know the basics about the economic system you are defending here. Or more likely, you do know, but are lying in order to spin your bullshit narrative. But you know, whatevs.
Not surprisingly, they always get it wrong. Have you ever noticed that late-stage socialist failures always run out of essential items like toilet paper?
I'd love for this prick, or anyone else for that matter, to point me to one late-stage socialist country that ever fucking existed. But I know he can't, because it's never fucking happened.
Venezuela.
Oh, for fuck's sake, the right wing just never shut the fuck up about Venezuela. They genuinely seem to think it proves some point, which it doesn't, because 2/3 of the Venezuelan economy is still in private ownership, so it isn't fucking socialist, you cuckheads.
Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, is the most recent example of socialism driving a prosperous country into an economic ditch.
No, actually that was capitalism, in the form of a massive drop in the price of oil, which has crippled the Venezuelan economy. And of course, the connivance of various capitalist countries around the world who have imposed horrific sanctions on the country in order to snuff out any chance of a left-wing good example in the region. Which makes me wonder, if capitalism is so great, why doesn't it just allow socialism the opportunities of the free marketplace of ideas? Why they gotta conspire to destroy and overthrow socialist countries? If socialism is so terrible, surely it'll just fall away naturally, right? It's almost as if the capitalists are scared of letting any socialist movement thrive because they know it would make capitalism untenable as an option going forward. I don't think these capitalists have the best interests of the people at heart at all.
Now, maybe you think it's an unfair example. I'm not sure why, but okay. will ignore the fact that leftist activists celebrated it as a great socialist success right up until it wasn't.
You know damn well why it isn't a fair example, and I've just explained to you why, so I'm moving on. Venezuela was not hailed as a socialist success story. Many socialists around the world were cautiously optimistic for the Bolivarian Revolution and the positive early changes it made to the system there. But that's all, okay? Optimism. Not mission accomplished, not hang the banner, not, oh, we did it, guys, success story. That's total fucking bollocks, you lying hack bastard.
But what about Western European countries? Don't they have socialist economies?
No.
People seem pretty happy there. Why can't we have what they have? Free healthcare, free college, stronger unions. Good question, and the answer may surprise you. There are no socialist countries in Western Europe. Most are just as capitalist as the United States.
Well, yes and no. Whilst there are no socialist countries in Western Europe, to say that they are as capitalist as America is rather silly, especially given how much time you right-wing bastards have spent telling us how universal healthcare is evil socialism, which isn't fucking true, but I'm just pulling them up on their ludicrous double standards here. Because if those countries have all those social benefits but are just as capitalist as America, why do you right-wing shitstains fight the introduction of those self-same social benefits in America with all the mega outrage force that you can possibly muster? It's almost as if you know you're full of shit and are just working in the interests of the uber rich or something.
But only a free market capitalist economy can produce the wealth necessary to sustain all of the supposedly free stuff Europeans enjoy.
Citation fucking needed on that one, home slice. Where the fuck do you get the claim that only capitalism can do that? You do realise that states have existed a hell of a lot longer than capitalism, right? And that unless you know everything about all possible economic systems, including those that have yet to fucking exist, then your claim of capitalism being the only such system is worth about as much as a fistful of pocket lint, you bullshitter.
In a 2015 speech at Harvard, Denmark's Prime Minister took great pains to make this point. I know that some people in the U.S. associate the Nordic model with socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy.
Well, the Danish Prime Minister, Lars Rasmussen, and what a deliciously Danish name that is both right and kind of wrong here. He is of course correct that Denmark is a capitalist nation, not a socialist one, but his wording here is suspect as fuck. Firstly, capitalism still kinda has elements of planned economics. It's not the overarching plan of a socialist state, but it's still not an absolute free market. No such thing has ever existed. Or, if there are any ANCAP douchebags watching, nor could it ever possibly exist. Get your heads out of your asses. And secondly, he seems to completely differentiate between socialism and markets, which is nonsense. There is such a thing as market socialism. It's a real philosophy and a real option. But also, he further insinuates that capitalism and markets are somehow synonymous, which isn't fucking true, because A, capitalism is not just markets. It's a fuck of a lot more exploitation on top of that. And B, markets existed before capitalism and will still exist when capitalism runs its course. Capitalism, as it is so fond of doing, has merely co-opted a pre-existing human interaction and pretended like it was their own innovation. It's disgusting theft of human labour, which is actually a pretty decent summation of capitalism in general, really.
The more capitalism, the less socialism you need. Look at America since 2017. A policy of lower taxes and less government regulation, that's more capitalism, has led to a robust economic expansion, something thought impossible just a few years earlier.
Wow, just bold-faced lies now. And it shouldn't be surprising given that this motherfucker was actually Trump's original pick, all the way back in 2016, for Secretary of Labour, before he was withdrawn due to him being about as popular as leprosy, which was down to his appalling treatment of his workers, his opposition to the minimum wage, and the fact that he employed an undocumented migrant, which is very Trump indeed. I mean, it's very, very dishonest of you not to flag up the fact that this guy was not entirely an unbiased or objective commentator here. Anyways, as to the substance, such as it was, of the points he made here. Firstly, the Trump tax cuts have been devastating to the state of US finances, increasing the national debt from $19 trillion to $22 trillion in just over 18 months. And the US budget deficit has grown by 17% in 2018 alone, and is also on track to top $1 trillion for the first time by the year 2020. Which is all very interesting given that not only did Trump not pledge to increase the national debt and deficit, but he promised to completely eliminate both inside 8 years. Yeah, it seems that Trump is as full of shit as Prager U. And as for the private sector, well, the picture is pretty split. Those well-paying secure jobs that Trump promised to bring back, well, that hasn't fucking happened. Oh yeah, and the trade deficit ballooned by 20%. So much for those trade wars being so easy to win, eh, Donald? But on the upside, Trump's base did very well. No, not the American people, the uber wealthy, of course. Yes, corporate profit rates hit an all-time high in 2018. So if you're incredibly rich, Trump has been very good for you. But if you are part of the 99%, he has royally fucked up everything for you and your kids, and their kids, and their kids, and so on. Kinda seems like these capitalists don't have the interests of the people at heart at all.
Economic expansion gets people off welfare and into work. That's less socialism.
Oh my god, you stupid bastard. Earlier in the video, you said that the Nordic countries having social welfare spending was not socialist. Now you are saying that social welfare spending in the form of unemployment benefits is socialism. Can you please pick one line of bullshit and stick to it, you fucking cretins? Now the rest of the video is basically him repeating his bullshit capitalism is economic democracy line of argumentation, which I dealt with earlier, so I'm not going over it again. But I did just want to play the outro to the video, because it's kind of breathtaking when you actually examine it.
So beware what you ask for. You just might get it. I'm Andy Puzder, the author of The Capitalist Comeback for Prager University.
So the financial backers of this video, the William S. Knight Foundation, is a religiously related spiritual development 501c3 tax-exempt charitable organisation that gives money mainly to Christian fundy bullshit. And when I say money, I mean fuck tons of money. And it's not just these rich wankers funding PragerU. After all, the billionaire Wilkes brothers are the major bankrollers of Dennis Prager's little demon baby YouTube derpfest. Now you might be asking why all of this is relevant. Well, let me play the rest of the outro and we'll see.
Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
Yes, even with all of the right-wing filthy rich wankstain money flowing in, they still try to get donations from people. But what's worse than that? Imagine how pathetic you would have to be. Imagine how utterly spineless. What a fucking asshole you would have to be to give your hard-earned money to PragerU, even though you know they are backed by some of the richest pricks out there. I mean, look how much fucking money PragerU has, for fuck's sake. The world is mad, I tells ya. Mad! And on that charity database trawling bombshell, I shall wrap this up. Firstly, as with all PragerU videos, don't believe the bullshit they are pumping out here. It's complete trash, and the links are all below to show just that. Capitalism has fuck all to do with altruism or caring for people. It is greed, sheer bloody greed, and it's despicable. But more importantly than the regurgitated anal scrapings that constitute the content of that PragerU video is the reason for its creation in the first place. Now, whilst Prager have been making anti-socialist and pro-capitalist propaganda for years, the recent uptick in this particular type of drivel that they're creating is quite telling. PragerU and the boomer right are scared, and they're fucking right to be scared. Socialism, or at least what passes for it in mainstream discourse in America, is having a moment of resurgence, and given the age demographics and attitudes towards socialism, or at least what they think socialism is, which is basically social democracy but whatever, right, that trend is only going to increase, as older conservative types die off, and younger, more receptive people become more socially and economically active and dominant. Also, an advantage with selling leftism to younger people is that the usual Red Scare tactics of the Cold War era really don't have the same impact on them at all, because to them the Soviet Union never really existed. It's just this far-off historical thing, and China is where their iPhone comes from, which is problematic as fuck, but that's really not the point here. PragerU and the old-school neoliberal economic boomerist fuckery that they represent are on their way out, and deep down they know it. They can sense it, but fight it all they want, they will ultimately have to bow to the inevitable. They will lose, and I could not be more here for it if I tried, which I do, all the time. Hey Prager! F you!
Oh my god, I'm so fucking clever.
And I'll leave you with some quotes from Martin Luther King. Now, I know that as a white person on the internet, quoting Martin Luther King usually means I'd be trying to back up some sort of hideously racist bullshit, but in this instance, I just want to remind everyone of the greatness of the man in his opposition to the evils of capitalism. And whilst I don't agree with the religious elements of his orations, the general points he makes are as true today as they were then, by which I mean really, 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 really fucking true. Take it away, Doctor.